Hi, everybody. Asia has remained prosperous and peaceful for almost 4 decades until recently, when the spokesperson of a protectionist superpower threatens to initiate a crusade against a non-Caucasian civilization in Asia. 10 countries in this region, Asia, get united through practical cooperation and dialogue. Today, I'm very much honored to be joined by television hosts from 4 Asian countries in a 5-way discussion about the importance of respecting the diversity in Asian civilizations.
How do you define Asia?
The largest continent with diverse cultures and civilizations, a combination of ancient and modern. Asia is the East in Western stereotypes and is misunderstood in many ways.
What exactly are Asian values?
Inclusive, balanced, diligent, and family-oriented. Asian values celebrate the community over individualism, and harmony is embedded in our blood.
In what ways is Asia diversified?
Distinct languages, cultures, religions, and lifestyles. Asia is a geographically expansive and populous region characterized by fascinating social and cultural variation.
How will the rise of Asia reshape the global economic order?
Asian civilizations evolved with the modernization of the Asian society. Asia's economic growth brings new growth patterns to the world, which expand the global economy.
Where are women positioned in Asian community?
Women's rights and positions are changing in Asian society today, portraying a more confident image for the world and for the future.
Join us in dialogue of Asian civilizations. I'm Yang Rui, anchor of Dialogue on CGTN. Today I'm very much honored and delighted to co-host this panel with 4 anchors from South Korea, Malaysia, India, and Azerbaijan. Welcome to our special program of Dialogue on Asian Civilizations. Now, let me introduce our guest speakers on this side. Dr. Java Motagi, Secretary General of the Asia-Pacific Broadcasting Union. Professor Wang Hui from the Department of Literature and History in the School of Humanities at Tsinghua University. Pavan Dugal, founder and chairman of the International Commission on Cybersecurity Law. Kyu Ken Harriet, Cambodia's Information Minister. Dr. Li Gong, professor at Seoul National University. Sam Burnett, Chief Executive Officer of the Middle East Broadcast Corporation. And Zhang Zhixin, Counselor of the Department of Asian Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. Our discussion here are divided into 3 parts, which will cover the diversity of Asian civilizations, civilization and economic development in Asia, and women in Asia. First, let me hand over the discussion to Jennifer Moon from Arirang TV and Termina Kausuji from Bernama Malaysian National News. They will lead the first session's discussion on diversity of Asian civilizations. Jennifer?
Well, I thank you, Yang Roy, for the fabulous intro, and thank you, CGTN, for inviting us. Arirang TV is delighted to be co-hosting this event, the first televised debate on the dialogue of Asian civilizations. I'm Jennifer Moon.
Absolutely. I'm Tamina Kauji, representing Bernama, which is Malaysia's national news agency, and we are delighted in partnership to be here co-hosting this essential dialogue that gets the ball rolling on Asian civilizations.
Right. We asked what you, our viewers, interest the most on this particular topic on social media, and topping the list was diversity of civilizations, and hence the topic of our starting discussion.
That's right.
Now, Henry Kissinger, in his book, World Book, he argued that what we know of Asia, what we call Asia, is really an oversimplification of a diverse region that has several civilizations and culture. Having said that, do Asians hold particular attitudes and beliefs that are really distinct from non-Asians? Do you think we can identify these as Asian values that are coherent among different civilizations in Asia? I'd like to address to Dr. Javad Mutagi, please.
Well, we believe that this is a fact. The region is diverse in all its aspects, in religion, in culture, in population, politics, governing system, etc. But we believe that diversity is not a threat. Diversity is an opportunity for us to enrich societies. And we believe in this particular point, the task for us as broadcasters, as media professionals, is to try to change the challenges to opportunity. If diversity creates challenges, naturally, we have to try to create dialogue and get the people to talk together as the President of China rightly mentioned today, it's people-to-people connection. And in people-to-people connection, media plays the most important role. To involve public and involve them to create a constructive dialogue. We broadcasters, we do a lot of work in this respect. And dialogue may not necessarily be talking together. For instance, we were just in Delhi for a dance festival. It was a dance festival among 120 dancers from different countries.
Wow.
And that's actually using a universal language.
Jumping off the question of cultural exchange, I'd like to address this to Mr. Q. Kanharit. Let's talk about the fact that Asian civilizations, though, it really is an oversimplification. But do we still have shared cultural values that somehow are a commonality that unite us, despite the fact that we are from such various regions?
I think that there are some common point of Asian civilization is family, the supremacy of a community over individual, the social stability, social order, and the respect to the community. And this, I think that this is basic for all Asian civilization.
Right, I think, Tamina, you raised a very important point. In fact, South Korea's Kim Dae-jung argued in early 1990s that what we believe to be Asian, those Asian values, don't really exist, actually. And given Asia's immense region and culture and religious and political diversity, in fact, he said these principles rooted in Asia, that values that place priority on people, human beings, freedom, these are values that are not only Asian, but universal in value. So beyond that, now Asian values versus universal values, where do we stand today, Dr. Ligon?
I think Asian values are the values of the pre-modern societies. All the civilizations are the civilizations of the pre-modern empires or pre-modern societies. Therefore, in the pre-modern agrarian society, we emphasize upon the values like family-oriented values, community-oriented values, or stability of a society. But civilizations and cultures' values should evolve in accordance with the evolution of the society in the direction of modern or even postmodern societies. Therefore, modern values such as transparency, accountability, human rights, freedom of speech, rule of law, institutions, these kinds of values should be included in the evolutionary process of our cultures and civilizations.
Right,
Reversal,
so if I
right?
could perhaps jump in over there. Now, moving into Professor Wang Hui, let's talk about how we actually bridge the gap between individualistic freedoms that are styled, one would be able to argue, after the Western model with Asia's collectivist nature, regardless of which society you're looking at. We're very communal in nature. How do we bridge the gap?
I think that these are following the developments. So first of all, in the whole region, not only in the whole Asia, but in single country, you have the diversities. Some urban people, more or less, the lifestyle is similar to other areas. But in the villages, in the countryside, maybe share some other kind of lifestyle. Still, the diversity here. I would like to go back to the early questions you mentioned, that the Henry Kissinger's idea of whether or not there's an oversimplification of the Asia with diverse and so on and so forth. The first of all, we need to think about where the starting point to observe Asia. That's the one of the question. Of course, this is a basic fact that we are so diversified. However, in the beginning of the 20th century, a Japanese artist raised the issue of Asia is one, but one means multiple at the same time. And Sun Yat-sen, the founder of the Republic of China, also made the statement of the Great Asianism. That kind of the arguments about the Asia or the one Asia as one, to some extent, was a response to that, at that time, was ongoing process of the colonization and the very unequal structure of the whole world. So in that sense, when the people talk about the Asia, they talk about whether or not we can share something in the world, whether or not we can create a certain kind of the equal relations. So in that sense, the people, even we are diversified, we are so different. However, we do share some values. For example, we respect for the life. For example, each kind of the cultures, and we respect the developments and its relation to the ecological protection, for example. And so from that point of view, we need to have a reflection on the developmentalism, even on this globalization. So in that sense, we did share some values here, but whether or not we call it as an Asian value, but really rooted in our everyday life here and there.
If I may, can I jump in here?
Right, sure.
I think, I share Professor Wang Hui's point of view. For this question, I think there's two parts. One is, diversity. I think all of us agree with the diversity in Asia. But on the other hand, there's something, in common. I think the sense of Asia, increasingly emerged after the Second World War, and when the Asian countries take the destiny by their own hand. And as we know that Asian countries first advocated, the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. Also, together with African countries, we put forward, the 10 principles of handling state-to-state relationships. All these contributions we need to keep in mind.
Right. I mean, it's interesting that you bring up the Asian versus what are non-Asian, because a U.S. State Department official just recently ignited controversy after saying that when explaining U.S. foreign policy, she said that for the first time ever, the U.S. will be facing a competitor, great power competitor, that's non-Caucasian civilization. Now, she got criticized left and right, but I'd like to address this question to Sam Barnett. Is this coming to reality? It's, of course, Sam Huntington's theory, hypothesis. Now, are we seeing this come to real life?
I think if you're a poor leader, if you're a malicious leader, if you're an insecure leader, then you can certainly play the clash of civilizations card, and you can, on an ontological way, you can make it real, because you can if you get access to the media, and you can pollute the discourse. You can certainly have people think that way. Now, I don't think it stands up. I don't think it stands up to analysis. If you look at how geopolitical fault lines go, over the last 50 years, the U.S. has been allies with South Korea.
Absolutely.
With Japan, with Saudi Arabia. And I don't think anyone would argue that they all share a civilizational basis. Now, Huntington would say that doesn't matter. Geopolitics will change, but at the structure are these cultural things. As I listened to my colleagues making the arguments and saying that Asian values are about family and community and respect, I thought that kind of described most of the Europeans that I know as well. So I think when you reduce it to these basics, I think all of this loses power.
Right.
If you want to analyze what's going on in the world, unemployment, climate change, alienation of rural societies. You have it in China, they have it in the US, and that's what's driving insecurity. I think the civilization thing is a misnomer, and it's a tool that insecure leaders are using for their own advantage.
Right, so moving in from there into the fact that a lot of the global problems that we have are also colonialism's long legacy, in particular what's affecting us here in Asian civilizations. No one can run away from that fact. I'd like to jump to Dr. Pavan Dugal. Now, looking forward and moving towards the future, how can Asian civilizations, major nations within Asia, be they political or geostrategic, you've got India, you've got Malaysia, of course. How can we reconcile also the fact that we have diverse minorities, there's a difference in culture, in religion, even in ethnic groups, and bring this all together, in particular because we're actually non-homogeneous? How do we stop our infighting before we can progress and step up?
I think one of the biggest strengths of Asia has been its diversity. And once we recognize that, not as a weakness, but as a strength, you quickly start seeing the canvas in a different light altogether. The fact remains is that this region has been the most resilient in terms of its response. Yes, different areas, different ethnic groups, different approaches, but by and large, the resilience has been one common factor. And as I now see the advances and the response of Asian nations towards the internet bandwagon, I'm more than happy to say that this particular resilience is showing off in very remarkable colors. For example, countries are increasingly realizing that internet is going to be their biggest driver for economic, for their social and political growth per se. So consequently, over a short period of time, the entire world's concentration and attention has come on to Asia. Why? Because Asia is the world's biggest e-commerce market. It's the biggest trust area that anywhere in the world, any company would want to dream to be there. So I think we as Asians do not need to be ashamed of our ethnic diversity. We are rather very confident about it as one of the major building blocks on the basis of which further progress can take place. But mind you, we cannot have complacency set in. We cannot say, look, we were diverse, we are resilient, and therefore that's a guarantee for success. No, that's only a window of an opportunity for leapfrogging. And I think that opportunity is something that all the Asian nations need to collectively catch hold of, because this is the train that's come on the platform. It's not going to be there for a long period of time. Let's catch the train before it goes.
I really appreciate the exchange of ideas across the table and the aisle. For example, our focus on modernity as opposed to pre-modern governance, universality as opposed to diversity in looking at something that cements the social cohesiveness. Whatever our opinions, we agree to disagree. And this is also one of the fundamental principles that make what we are today. I thank you so much. Let's move on. I would like to open up the floor to our moderators, my colleagues from India and Azerbaijan, to take the debate forward to issues like civilization and the individual economic developments in Asia.
Thanks, Ray, for that. No conversation around Asia is complete till you have India in it. And here I am, representing the world's largest democracy. I'm Gauri Dwivedi from NewsX. Yes, of course, we've spoken about civilization, we've spoken about Asian values, but the world knows that Asia is where the next growth of prosperity, the next leg of growth really is. Leading from the front, of course, is China and India, and that's exactly what I will be co-hosting with my co-panelist from Azerbaijan.
I am Wafa Gulieva from Azerbaijan State News Agency, Azertouch, and co-hosting this second segment on civilization and economic development in Asia, featuring Azerbaijan and India.
Let's talk first about the kind of prosperity that we are seeing in India and most importantly in China as well, and larger Asian countries that we are seeing. It's set to increase from here, and whether you talk about productivity levels, you talk about consumption patterns, you talk about the GDP, the growth estimates, all of it essentially is in Asia. And obviously that is impacting, Professor Wang, the kind of geopolitical situation and the geopolitical dynamics between Asia and the West. It's bound to happen, but do you see this escalating into some kind of bigger tensions going forward, or do you think this is a reality that the world, the West, has accepted?
Now it's a really great change in the last at least 200 or 300 years, because this region, again, after the 18th century, became so important, and economically speaking, and other impact. So the crucial issue, I think, in this region, most complicated issue is that when we talk about the end of the Cold War, but the old tensions, old negative legacy from World War II and the Cold War, to some extent still existed here. We see the Korean Peninsula, and we see what happened in Taiwan Strait. We see a lot of the Pakistan, India, and those were the older legacies. I think the first of all, we need to find the way to find a solution to the region for a certain kind of the form, to develop a certain kind of form of the regional integration in order to have a real reconciliations for these regions. This is the first, which means that's why we really need to promote the solidarity in these regions. I think this is the first. Second, I think compared to the other developments, different the phases, like the rise of Europe or the rise of America. This region, I would like to cite a historian, Giovanni Arrighi, who was an Italian historian. He said that look at the economic developments in Asia, especially focus on China and Japan at that time. He said that never happened in the history that economically developed so fast, but militarily relatively weak. So in that sense, those powers, economic powers, search for more equal relations, which more benefited to each other, not for the direct dominance for others. You look at the early the centuries, what happened before. So in that sense, we can develop the new ideas, learn from our own history. Yes. I mean, both Asian history and modern history, to search for a shared, more equal development.
Let's come back to the larger issue of Asian civilizations and the economic development, the progress that has been made so far, the challenges that lie ahead, which is where I want to bring you in, sir. When you talk about, Mr. Zhang, that when you talk about specific structural reforms that countries need, that Asian countries need, there is a lot of inequality. Yes, there is rapid growth, but there is inequality. There are challenges of increasing productivity. How do you see those reforms being addressed by Asian countries?
There's two keywords. One is One Belt, One Road. Another is a dialogue of civilizations. And as we know, right now, the world is undergoing the major changes unseen over the past century. And even though we witnessed great progress has been made over the past many decades, but we are still facing a lot of challenges, like the sluggish economic growth and traditional and non-traditional security challenges. And I think when you look at One Belt, One Road as a bridge, and this bridge will link different the civilizations, and this kind of the structure will make this world much better, much colorful.
I want to ask Mr. Q. Ken Harris. I would like to ask some development projects initiated by Asian countries, including some by China. As we know, the Silk Road and One Belt and One Road projects are put forward by China. What's the expectation of further deepening cooperation on the Belt and Road and building what's called a community of shared future for mankind?
I think that is a very good idea and timely thinking, because of this initiative, we provide first a good communication among the people. Secondly, also this could provide development to the area that if without this project, there won't be any development there. And by this development, it would be make people closer. But just this morning, I agree with the Greek president when he say, through civilization never clash with each other. It complemented. And this afternoon, I talked about the danger of shortcut knowledge created by social media, by the development of new technology. You talk about migrants. You talk about the misery created by the globalization. When people come out from their native village, when they face difficulty, they try to understand the cause. And by just, you have a simple idea, distribute in the social media, they could find some scapegoat, and this create what's called a conflict. And you have the shift also between the generation, between us, that we can understand well about civilization, and you have the young one who just, they don't finish their school, their knowledge, and just by learning something simple from the social media, from all this technology, they thought that this is true. And after that, this, you can have the shift between the in the society, and this also the problem that can create a problem. That's why the role of the media, the role of the artists, the role of the politicians, media stakeholder are very important to make the people understand. And by creating some kind of organization that can help us, these people understand what is civilization. Okay. And this is very important.
All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about, I think, the power of technology. Nobody can underestimate that. I think the world understands the power of technology. But Dr. Pawan Duggal, the next phase of growth is going to be powered by technology, but it also has its pros and cons. It's one of those things that needs to be regulated to some extent by countries. It has its challenges, but huge growth potential. How do you see that, sir?
I think Asia needs to be prepared for the three sisters. The three sisters that I see on the horizon are artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and blockchains. And clearly, Asia is beginning to show its thought leadership. China, 2 weeks back, has now come up with a new law on artificial intelligence. So clearly, the world is looking up to Asian countries on how they will go ahead and legislate and effectively address the legal, policy, and regulatory issues pertaining to these technologies. But while these technologies represent the bright future, there's a dark side to it. The dark side is that the dark net is massively growing in Asia. More and more Asians are wanting to go to the dark net for a large number of activities. But more significantly, I think the fundamental basic theme that Asia needs to today work on is cybersecurity. That's one area where we've begun to see sparks of brilliance, and that brilliance is actually spearheaded none other than by China, who in the last 2 years has come up with 3 dedicated and very comprehensive legislations on cybersecurity. We have countries like Vietnam, like Thailand, and various other stakeholders who have come up with dedicated laws, but that's only the beginning. The fact of the matter is that Asians are constantly under attack of potential breaches of cybersecurity.
I'm so impressed by our dynamic discussions about urbanization, peace and development, clashes of civilizations, and particularly the use of digital technology in an age of globalization. I so appreciate the heat of the discussions, and in fact, co-evolution of different civilizations as well as globalization itself largely depends on empowerment and emancipation of women. In Asia, most of the countries are regarded as developing countries, and therefore, if women here in this region could enjoy equal access to education, jobs, would somehow decide the future of this community that we share in Asia. Let me first ask a question that goes to my colleague in Azerbaijan. What do you think the hope lies in shaping a bright future for women in this region, Asia?
In our country, women don't lack any opportunity, to take major positions in the society. They are, along with being mothers and wives, they are deputy ministers, committee chairs. Even our first vice president is a woman. You know, our deputy parliament speaker is a woman, and they make their contributions to global peace and stability in the world. I think so.
India, we see remarkable progress in liberating women from kitchens. At the same time, I noticed in the inaugural speech of Prime Minister Modi for the first term that they should build more toilets than temples to really guarantee safety and security of women in India, to avoid sexual violence against this part of your population. What's the progress? Can you update about what's been done since I mean, congratulations on his campaign success, by the way.
Thanks for that. I want to start with a quote by Mao, which is, "Women make up half of the sky." So yes, if there are more toilets that are being created, it also provides dignity to women. Because, you know, let's face it, India still has a lot of women not having access to closed toilets, which is a shame, and heads should hang. But at the same time, if something is being done, I think a lot of progress to that effect is extremely important. Because when you start about and you talk about women, before empowerment, it is education, it is then employment, and that is when empowerment comes. And all of that focal point is the family, which is where such basic access to basic amenities like closed toilet is extremely important. So to that effect, I think a huge congratulations to the government for the kind of success it has made. Upwards of 20 crore, 200 million toilets is what has been created. Look at the sheer size and scale that we are talking about here.
What do you make of the prominence of political participation by women in South Asia in particular?
Yes, I think yes, there is, of course, the dynasty connect. Nobody can deny that. It's far easier if you have a very popular surname. It's far easier for anybody, not just for women. But at the same time, I think progress has been made just specifically to India, since, you know, it's a large country. We must talk about it. The Women's Reservation Bill, you know, it has gone back and forth so many times that it's so shameful that no political party till now has actually said that they're going to back it completely to pass it, which means that women do not have a quota of the amount of representation that they have in the Indian Parliament. Having said that, I still feel a lot of progress has been made. In my generation, I think a lot more women across South Asia have political participation than my mothers.
Malaysia, truly Asia. Tell us more about the charm of Malaysian women and their participation in social, economic, and political life.
Well, Yang Rui, thanks for that. But first and foremost, I'd like to reframe the structure, because we're actually talking about women's equity, women's rights. Now, instead of a rights-based perspective, why not? Since we're also talking about economy, Asian civilization, let's draw the focus onto the global gender pay gap. Now, the World Bank's latest study from May 2018 states comprehensively that the world loses 160 trillion USD due to the gender pay gap itself. Now, if that is not a case for shared equity for women anywhere in the world, and particularly in Asia, where we've got the largest proportion of working women and upcoming women, I don't know what is. So let's look at it from that perspective. When you empower women, when you put us in positions of power, merit-based, of course, you not only have stronger social structures, but you have more equitable social structures, because also drawing from the quote of Mao, if we are half the sky, how can you create 100% of it without our buy-in on 50% at least? And I'd also like to draw the point towards this year's International Women's Day campaign tagline, which is better the balance. It's not just about pushing women up into positions of power when they merit it, but it's also about getting men to join hands with us to support us on the domestic front, in the political front. If you've got a woman and she's a CEO, she's a mother of 3, is her husband also pitching in at home? Those are the bigger questions you've got to ask. Home and hearth, right? Men have also got to start balancing it, not just the women.
Very articulate about your ideas, strong ideas on women, not only in Malaysia but Asia. I have the strong feeling that the opinions on this side by women are far stronger on this side. So
let's open it up to the panel as well.
Jennifer.
Yes.
What about the women of childbearing age? Could they be protected very well in your country, ROK, a democracy?
Well, democracy it is. And in fact, with the new president who's been in office he's entering his third year this week, actually, we've actually introduced many policies that encourage women of childbearing age and whatnot to come back to the workforce and to come back and work for different corporations and to really shatter that glass ceiling. And I want to add to Tamina's point that if gender pay gap does not really hit you home, let me tell you this: the UN estimates that the Asia Pacific region loses about $89 billion annually because of limited access for women to join the workforce. So that's how much we're losing. If we want to become more economical, then we really want to hire more women.
That's right.
Now it's your time to ask questions for this side to address your concerns on women.
Good point.
Male voices might say a lot more.
We know that Confucianism values and beliefs are the fundamental basics of our culture and civilization. Now, do you believe that the Confucianism values are what's to blame for the specific gender roles that we're forced upon almost in the society? I want Dr. Javed.
See, I want to point out what Sam said. See, the fact is in many countries in Asia, in Africa, we see discrimination against women. We see women do not have job compared to the education that they have. We see in some countries, because of culture, because of religion, I don't know why, even they don't have an identification certificate for women, or some of them are named by the father. So the key is to empower women. The key is, of course, rules, regulations, but education. Education and long-term, because there are many countries that girls are more educated. And movement started, but I think it takes years to respond because discrimination is there. And media again comes in, and media is a force to give power, to give voice to women. In several countries like Malaysia, I think the situation is very good. And
the situation is getting better in Malaysia because we already have 9 ministers who are female ever since the new Pakatan Harapan government, and in excess of around 20 women heading various government-linked companies and agencies. I want to draw the question back into the internet arena, broadcasting. Let's talk about gender-based violence online.
Let me add one thing. You see, my feeling, and perhaps this is also supported by the statistics, that we see less violence when women are leading positions. We see less corruption when women are leading positions and appointed to higher positions. And we see more violence created by men, sorry to say. And that is the fact. So we have to empower women in a way that they can be promoted to get positions in every possible organizations in order to run and in order to contribute to society.
Right. I'd like to ask Professor Wong, empowerment. What are some other ways to empower that, encourage women to get out there, to get into the workforce, to get the society to recognize that we need women's participation?
I think that if you take China as a case, it's some difference, I think. Because on the one hand, you mentioned that the Confucianism, tradition, family value, and so on and so forth. There was a debate whether or not the Confucianism was biased against the woman and so on and so forth. But this year is the 100 years anniversary of May 4th. We just celebrate that. After that, the equality between man and woman, especially the gender issue was raised at that time very radically. After that, in the long Chinese Revolution, I think that one of the great achievements of the Chinese Revolution was the liberation of women in our society.
We call the May the 4th movement, we celebrate the 100th anniversary, the Chinese equivalent of Renaissance in China.
Whether or not we can use that, the Renaissance...
Enlightenment movement.
Yeah, Enlightenment or the Renaissance or the cultural movements, but basically the huge change for our society. So in the societal level, I think that basically the China enjoyed much more equal relations between man and woman, but in certain fields were not necessary. Compared to India, for example, you have so many elites.
Yes.
The women elites occupy high positions in different fields. Compared to that, but not that many, the leading figures. However, in the different levels, the majority of women, as a lot of women had access. But now, we are facing the new challenge because the job markets, because certain kind of the choices for that created a new discrimination against women. So that we need to work for the further for the women's rights.
Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate this dynamic part of the dialogue across the aisle in facilitating co-evolution of the civilizations in Asia and in pushing forward the social progress in this dynamic region. Up next, it's time for our audiences. In order to get the diversified perspectives, we set an open platform online to collect questions from the whole world. People from different countries were very active to send their questions, concerns, and expectations about Asian civilizations and beyond to us. Most of them taped their questions by videos. We will play all of the audience's videos now and randomly choose 5 questions to answer. Let's take a quick look.
The ancient Silk Road success can be accredited to this very factor that we were all learning and growing together. Today, in the time of the nation state, it seems that we have imagined a fixed identity, however, and we are trying to protect it. We need to justify our premise and we need to be unique. So, are we really moving towards a time of relative conflict where we are at odds, different, defining ourselves uniquely, or is this selective amnesia? We really are just the way we always were. Should we revisit our current values and concepts of identity?
May I kindly invite Professor Li Gung from the Seoul National University addressing her concern from Pakistan.
Well, I think we have been always very unique and very diverse all the way from the beginning of the human history. But during the history of the unfolding of human history, there were periods where empires dominate and where empires oppress this uniqueness and diversity, or the Cold War era. Because of the Cold War overlay, the structural overlay, the uniqueness was suppressed and diversity was suppressed. But after the end of the Cold War, there have been more contacts with different countries and different ethnic groups, different people, more dialogues between civilizations. And that bring about some of the conflicts that she mentions. But I do think that in the age of globalization, we have to figure out how to come up with the so-called hybrid culture. For example, in Korea, we have a global stars like K-pop stars like BTS or Psy. If you listen to their music is very Western. It's a hybrid music and very popular among all the global audience. But at the same time, they sing in Korean and they are very, very polite. This is an Asian value, and this is a hybrid culture. And if you can come up with this kind of hybrid culture, there are a lot of ways to communicate with others, while maintaining our identities.
About your answers to ideas of identity, let's quickly have yet another round of survey to see who is one of the lucky few to raise the question and direct the question to one of the audience, to one of the guest speakers here.
Hi, my name is Percy and I'm a fashion designer. When I'm looking for inspiration, I look for things as diverse as socioeconomic events or innovations. So my question for you is this: when I'm looking into your civilization, which socio-economic events or innovations should I be inspired by?
Judging from his accent, he's from the UK, and his question is very much about how to enjoy more of the inspirations and creativity in Asian civilizations.
One of the things that they've done in the UAE, despite the fact that they are still making a lot of money from oil, is that they are rapidly moving to renewable energy. And if you drive out 20 minutes from the center of Dubai, you see vast swathes of the desert which have been converted into solar panels, Mohammed bin Rashid solar park. And they're bringing the cost of solar energy right down beneath that of many other energies. And I think when they get those economies of scale, which they're really pushing for in Dubai, this could be a game changer.
Do you think the imagination of people in Dubai is likely to be exhausted by resource curse? Those countries who depend on oil wealth are likely to be impacted by fluctuations in energy prices.
A lot of the big push in the Middle East right now is an acknowledgement that they have been cursed by oil and that it is going to change and that they need to diversify the economy as quickly as they can. Dubai has gone through that in the last 20 years, and they've moved into tourism and trade and many different things. But I think the other countries are working this out. They realize that they have a huge youth unemployment issue. The economies have to be diversified, and that things are going to they are going to change, and they're going to change either badly or they're going to sort things out. But Dubai is an interesting one because they've used innovation, to the gentleman's question, and I think it's inspirational, and you'll see it all in Expo 2020 next year.
It's indeed diversification of industrialization in most of the states in the Gulf will provide silver lining for the next round of industrialization, other than their excessive reliance on the fossil fuel. Let's quickly have yet another round of survey to see who will be the next in the lucky few to raise his or her concerns.
I have always been intrigued by one question. Buddhism was originated in ancient India. It has great influence in China, East Asia, and the rest of the world. But it appears as though the influence of Buddhism has faded in India. What might be the main reasons for that? Thank you.
It's about Buddhism, one of the major religions that China was able to import many centuries ago, and I believe our guest speaker from India is in a better position to address his concern. Pavan?
Well, I think Buddhism was where civilization began to start realizing its wisdom. And Buddhism was the starting point of dissemination of this message of Lord Buddha across the world. Yes, over a period of time, this message has got to be more consolidated, strengthened in other jurisdictions. However, this is not to say that the message of Lord Buddha has faded away in Indian minds. It definitely has not. Today, Buddha's teachings are taught in Indian schools. Today, whether you're belonging or you are leaning toward Buddhism or not, you are taught what are the salient features on the basis of which Lord Buddha actually gave his message to the world. And I think Buddha's message has been one which has actually withheld and withstood the test of time. The fact of the matter is, it's relevant those days, it's even more relevant today. And I think Indians inherently not only recognize, respect that message, but try to inculcate that as part of their day-to-day lives. Yes, on top of the surface, it might appear that Buddhism is not being given the kind of focus, but try coming to any of these Buddhist pilgrimage sites, and you will see actually what we call in Indian tradition, asta, that belief in the human values that Lord Buddha had taught is actually now real, is actually being practiced. Therefore, I think it's a misnomer or a misconception to say that Buddhism is fading away. Sorry, it's one of those universal religions that is going to be evergreen. It's not fading away. You may temporarily get more focus on some other elements, but it's an intrinsic element of the Indian psyche, of the Indian mindset, and every Indian who's studied in India has an intrinsic respect for Buddhism, or Buddhist values, and tries to inculcate and follows those values in their day-to-day lives.
Indeed, faith and religion have played an important role in shaping what we are and what we stand for regarding social and economic development in this most dynamic region of Asia. To conclude this part of a Q&A, let's quickly have yet another round of survey and see who is the last but not the least.
Rejuvenation of Asia is an ongoing reality today. How do we set the political, social, and cultural agenda for Asia, which can address the aspirations of the young, provide gender equality, safeguard national security, and provide social security, which would lead to peace and prosperity in Asia? Thank you.
Social security is very important to guarantee our quality of the life. Let me direct this question to Q. Harriet from Cambodia. What are your thoughts?
For Cambodia, social security is very important because it's a basic need for everybody. And that's why for 2 years already, we implement the social security for everybody. It means that even a beggar can go to hospital, and if they have the card to show that they are poor, they can get a free treatment. And also now, the first time in Cambodian history that all workers, civil servant, worker in manufacturer, laborer in the agriculture, all of them can get the pay and get their what you call this, when they retire, they can get the pension. And if they get hurt or injured during the work, they get paid. And I think that this only we apply this and a very good one. And I think this guarantee stability of everybody, because for everybody in the world and in each society, when you grow up, the first question, do we have a job or not? And when you have a job, the second question is, when we have a house? And after that, the third question is, when I retire, can I have something to guarantee that I can cure any sickness or everything? And this we can make it. And after we make what we call an economic policy, very strict, that we can, after 40 years, after the fall of the Khmer Rouge, we can make it.
To show the charm of Mandarin, let me say this in 普通话，走远了，不要忘记我们为何出发。After you have had the long march, don't forget why you have embarked on this journey of self-rediscovery. Now, let me start this conclusion by a quick statement from each of the four moderators to summarize your thoughts, your feelings concerning the very important issue that we raised at the very beginning of the discussion, respect for diversity in Asian civilizations.
I think we had very fruitful discussions today here, and I hope that Asia, despite all risks and challenges, will continue developing and making contributions to the to peace, mutual understanding among nations.
And this representative from the most populous democracy in Asia and in the world.
Yes, it's been an absolutely engaging discussion, and at the heart of this really lies the fact that Asian century, by all standards, by all reports, has begun. Asia is going to regain its place in the world. Policymakers need to ensure that, and to all Asian people, your time has come.
A voice from a country that has the oldest politician. Dr. Mahathir, your statement, please.
That's right, we absolutely do. Now, raising the question of sustainability for an equitable future for everyone in Asia, and also perhaps globally, comes the question that we must all look towards history, perhaps. Let's not forget that all our countries, this region, in fact, is the birthplace, the cradle of human civilization itself. Look at our history of the Silk Road. what China also wants to perpetuate through the One Belt, One Road. We look towards not just visions, but practical, actionable solutions. And that comes from strong policy, but also a social contract that looks at equitable opportunity for women, for men, for the most marginalized in all our society.
Most of the Chinese would fully agree with you. We have a popular Chinese saying, 让历史告诉未来, let history tell the future of mankind and human civilization. Finally, a strong statement from ROK, a neighboring country in Asia, East Asia.
Right. I'd like to draw our focus to the medium of these talks, so dialogue. You know, dialogue is a very powerful tool that will make us strong, that will keep us bonded. So I really appreciate this setting. And, you know, who would have imagined that I would be sitting here in Beijing in my beautiful Korean traditional gown, you know, moderating this session. So the power of dialogue, how we can change. So let's keep the dialogue open and let's keep the discussions rolling.
Thank you very much. Dialogue instead of a monologue. Instead of adopting unilateral moves to go against globalization. That's why we enjoy this dynamic dialogue across the aisle. I thank everybody of you for your meaningful participation in facilitating this process of a dialogue between different civilizations instead of having clashes. I thank you so much.